Welcome to Truth, Realness, and Options, episode number 6. I'm Jeff Trotter, the executive producer and editor of Troll. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. First of all, I would like to say, once again, thank you for Kristen and Whitaker for coming out on our last episode. It was a good episode. And today, we're going to move on to the 6th episode of Season 2. Again, this is Season 2. And as you may know, every October, we go pink for the month of October. October is Breast Cancer Awareness. The National Breast Cancer Foundation top priorities is educating women on what they can do to be proactive with their breast health. Knowledge and early detection save lives. Did you know that one in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime? Why? You can't prevent it. It is important to be proactive about your health. Women with certain risk factors are more likely than others to develop breast cancer. A risk factor is something that may increase the chance of getting a disease. Some risk factors, such as drinking and alcohol, can be avoided, but most risk factors can't be avoided. Having a risk factor does not mean that a woman will get breast cancer. Many women who have risk factors never develop breast cancer. On the next episode, I will discuss who is at risk for breast cancer and provide information about preventative care services, mammograms. For more information, visit nationalbreastcancer.org. And at this time, I'm going to provide some facts of Black history. Every day is Black history, not just the month of February. Every day is Black history, ladies and gentlemen. So, did you know October 22nd, 1955, the first Black post office opened in Atlanta, Georgia on October 2nd, 1955. Also, Clarence S. Green becomes the first African American certified in neurological surgery. If you don't know what a neurological surgery is, a neurosurgeon is a surgeon specializing in surgery on the nervous system, especially for the brain and spinal cord. Again, Mr. Clarence S. Green became the first African American certified in neurological surgery back on October 22nd, 1953. I have some scriptures about patience. We all need to learn how to have patience, and that sometimes I do have to learn to have patience as well. How's it going, my cousin? I hope everybody's doing good. Thanks for tuning in. I want to share some scriptures before we move on. Romans 12:12, rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Again, that's Romans 12:12. Don't mistake God's patience for His absence. His timing is perfect, and His presence is constant. He's always with you. We're going to take a brief intermission. Coming up is our special guest speaker, Caddo Sheriff candidate Glenn Cornell. And guys, ladies and gentlemen, if you are tuning in, you have any questions that you may ask as far as to Mr. Glenn Cornell, what is his plans? What is his goals if he was to win sheriff? If you have any of those questions, just inbox me any questions you may have, because what I'm going to do is we're going to interview him Saturday, October 12th. As you know, it's tomorrow. It's the election day for the state of Louisiana. We're going to decide, we're going to see, will we have our Governor John Bel Edmonds, or will we have a new governor, or will we have a new sheriff? The fate is in everybody's hands, so it is important for everybody to go vote. Begin voting for the state of Louisiana tomorrow, October 12th. We'll be right back with Mr. Glenn Cornell. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to inbox them to me. I'm going to get ready to interview Mr. Glenn Cornell shortly, so we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Glenn Cornell, If I'm elected as Sheriff of Caddo Parish, my first priority is to retrain the deputies to properly operate Caddo Correctional Center, to provide a safer, more secure, less stressful environment for everybody in the facility. We will train all deputies in the philosophy of community outreach, which includes compassionate, positive interactions, meaningful partnerships, open communication, effective problem solving, and a means of lowering the crime rate and making our community safer. I will provide reasonable advocacy and employee protections as outlined in the Louisiana Police Officers' Bill of Rights to all Caddo Parish Sheriff's deputies. I humbly ask that on October 12th you vote for me, Glenn Cornell, number 90 on your ballot.
Welcome back to Truth, Realness, and Options. Once again, I am the executive producer and editor, Jeff Trotter. And today I have a very special guest, Mr. Glenn Cornell. I met him back at the C.C. Antoine 183rd birthday celebration, and I truly believe that he makes a good candidate. If everyone doesn't know what today it is, it's election day. So with no further ado, I welcome Mr. Glenn Cornell. Like I said, I met you back a month ago, and I felt like you could be a good candidate, especially replacing the current one that we have. That's just my own personal opinion. He has to go. He is truly tough on crime. He's tough on crime, all right. It's just some things that's just not worth being locked up for 3 months. 15 days, maybe. It's ridiculous over something minor. It's ridiculous. I'm going to ask you a few questions first. We're going to put the floor on you, and you can say whatever you like to say before I ask you these questions.
As you said, my name is Glenn Cornell. I'm running for Sheriff of Caddo Parish. Back in 1989 is when I got the calling to be Sheriff of Caddo Parish. So in 1990, I went to work for the Sheriff's Office for then Sheriff Don Hathaway, so I could get training, knowledge, experience, and wisdom as a deputy sheriff and learn about the Sheriff's Office and our community. So when the time came for me to run for sheriff, I would have all that experience and be a better sheriff for the people, and I'll be able to do a better job and be able to serve our community better. As you said, there are people getting locked up for minor crimes. Currently, right now, at the Sheriff's Office, about 90% of people who commit misdemeanor crimes are getting locked up in jail. Back when I was a younger deputy, about 90% of people who committed misdemeanor crimes were getting a piece of paper called a summons, and you would fill out a summons, they would get a copy of it, and you would send them on their way. They wouldn't even see a jail. Right now, most of those people are going inside the jail, and they're having to wait 2 or 3 days to be able to bond out on a misdemeanor crime, that they can be released on the summons and not have to show up in the jail, and then find out when they appear in court later and go to court. So in the future, when I become sheriff, that's one of the things I want to stop, is putting people in jail for misdemeanor crimes that are nonviolent and giving them summonses and sending them on their way. Also at the Sheriff's Office for the past 4 or 5 years at least, everybody who gets arrested for a DWI in Caddo Parish gets sent to jail. If you have a DWI first offense, second offense, third offense, it doesn't matter. You get arrested and you go to jail. We can't call somebody to give you a ride home. You have to go to jail. That's another thing that does not need to keep happening.
We have viewers' choice questions here on the show. So, Stacy Green asks, why should we vote for you, and what differences or changes you will make?
Out of all the candidates, including the current sheriff, I have more time and experience at the Sheriff's Office. I've been serving Caddo Parish at the Sheriff's Office for almost 29 years. As I said, I've worked many places at the Sheriff's Office, gained a lot of experience and knowledge. I started out as a young deputy at the jail, was a training officer when I worked at the jail. I helped them transition from the old jail to the new jail, which is now CCC. I did many years on the special response team. Worked in narcotics as an investigator, did undercover work. I was a canine handler. I worked with a dog for several years. Back in the mid-1990s, I introduced I helped introduce community-oriented policing to Sheriff Hathaway, and they decided that was the route we were going to take. They made me the first community liaison deputy. I went to many schools and learned about community-oriented policing. We sort of initiated it, but it never got into full swing, which is one thing I want to do is get that going full strength when I become the sheriff in what I call community outreach. Also, I was a supervisor on patrol for the last 14 years as sergeant on the north end of Caddo Parish. And there's many things that have to change. One of the main things that I want to start off with as soon as I can is the jail, which is being run improperly, which is causing the problems we're having with inmates and use of force issues. So we need to go back to running the jail properly. It's not being run properly, and this is what's causing the problems. It's causing deputies to quit. We're not getting new deputies. So we have a manpower shortage in the jail. Since we have manpower shortage in the jail, we have no people to take from the jail to put on patrol. So now we have a manpower shortage on patrol. So the problems at the jail are actually affecting the entire sheriff's office and the entire community of Caddo Parish, not just the inmates and not just the deputies working in the jail, but it's affecting everybody in the parish and at the sheriff's office.
Go on next to that also subjects with this next question I'm going to ask. But first, inmate overcrowding continues to be a major issue at the Caddo Correctional Center. So far, officials have not agreed on a plan to permanently fix the problem. Right now, there are just under 1,500 inmates housed at CCC. And as you see, Caddo Parish Commission has yet to address the overcrowding problem. So how do you deal with our overcrowding prison system?
One of the things, again, is people who are being put in jail for misdemeanor crimes that they can be given a summons for, and they can just be given a summons and never go into the jail for the crime they committed. Therefore, they're not waiting 2 or 3 days to bond out. Other things we did back in the 90s when we were at CDC and we only had half the capacity of the current jail. When the jail reached full capacity, we couldn't put any more people in there. So they work with the judges and the DA's office, which we can still do today, and get people's bond lowered, get people with nonviolent crimes, ROR, which is released on their own recognizance, which means that they just promise they're going to show back at the court and not have to pay bond. So these are all ways to stop the overcrowding and help keep from putting everybody in jail for misdemeanor crimes.
I have here from Anisi Miles. How are you going to deal with racism that some of the sheriffs show towards the inmates in the prison system?
If there is indeed an incident found where a deputy was racist towards anybody, I will have zero tolerance for racism. If we find that we have somebody who is indeed exhibiting racism and is racist, they will no longer be an employee at the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office. But we will make sure that that is the situation before we terminate anybody. But there will be zero tolerance for racism at the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office when I'm elected sheriff.
What do you think of early release for our non-violent offenders?
I'm a proponent for it. It saved that initiative that they started 2 years ago. Last year saved the state I think it was $18.5 million in expenses. I know people don't think $18.5 million is a lot, but of that $18.5 million, they're taking part of that money and putting it back into re-entry programs where inmates are helped to be able to get back into society from jail so they can find jobs, gainful employment, so they're not apt to commit more crimes and come back to jail. But of that money, $3.5 million of that 20% is being used for the juvenile justice system to help keep our juveniles from ending up in jail, and programs to keep down on the school to prison pipeline in the state of Louisiana.
Speaking of voting, everybody, we all know that it's very important to vote. And for those that don't, and those that's out there that doesn't vote, you always are the main ones somehow complain when we don't get the right outcome. So to me personally, I suggest and I encourage everyone to go out and vote because it is your right. We have so many people out there that have died for us to get that right. So you want to have any input on voting. Voting is very important.
I do have input. So I don't know the exact numbers, but I know 1/3 of the registered voters in Caddo Parish voted in the 2015 election. So there was about 53,000 people elected. Doing the math, 1/3, that makes there's about 150,000 registered voters in Caddo Parish. So over 100,000 people did not vote in the last election. That's a lot of people who can make a decision on what we get in the parish, what we get in the city, who we get as leaders. So it is very important that people decide to go vote. It only takes 50% if there's multiple candidates in a race. If you have more than two, one person has to get 50% to win. But if you have two people running in a race, one person has to get 50% plus one vote. That's one vote to win. So if people think their one vote doesn't count, their one vote could make the difference between their candidate winning or not winning. So I recommend that everybody go vote. And as you said, I've run into a lot of people that say we need a change at the sheriff's office, and the current person in there needs to go ahead and be replaced. But if all these people who want the current sheriff replaced don't go vote to get a new sheriff, I promise you, the current sheriff's people who want him to stay in there, they have a lot at stake. They're all going out today and voting to make sure he stays in there. So if anybody wants a change, they need to make sure they get to the polls and vote for somebody else so we can make that change.
Most definitely, everyone. Please go out there and vote because your voice matters. Your voice matters. I encourage everyone to go out and vote today. At this time, don't have any more of our viewers' choice questions.
I would like to add something. So, as far as the jail overcrowding, I already gave some methods of cutting that down that we can do locally with parish prisoners. We also, at Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office, take in state prisoners. Now, the state prisoners are used to make money off the state because the state pays for each individual prisoner we have in our jail. So if we do not have to accept all the state prisoners that they want to take, we tell the state that, hey, we'll take in 20 state prisoners, and they send us 20 state prisoners. So to help alleviate the overcrowding, instead of using state prisoners to make money for the jail, we can cut down the number of state prisoners we put in our jail, and that will also help with the overcrowding at Caddo Correctional Center.
All right. That's something I didn't know because I always wondered, like, how exactly do that work?
That's how it works. The state has one prison, that's Angola, and so once that's full, they have no other place to put them. So what they do is they contact sheriff's offices and see how much room they have in their jail. The sheriff's office will say, hey, I can take 10. Now the state has privately run jails because it is a big money business now. So if I can get 5,000 inmates in there at $34 a day, which I'm not sure that's the exact amount, but that's a lot of money. That's huge money. I know the sheriff's office makes a good bit of money off of state prisoners. Now, that being said, you can also take in federal prisoners, which the federal people pay you even more if you have federal prisoners in your jail. So if you can get more federal prisoners, then of course they make more money. And like I said, that's one way to cut down on the overcrowding is quit taking in prisoners from everybody else.
That's what happens when, let's say Joe gets transferred to another facility. So that's how that's happening. Somewhat of that.
Right. If you have somebody locally here that gets sentenced to state time, they may stay here, but you also have other people, if we have room, that could be from Baton Rouge, New Orleans. You have people get sent to facilities in Monroe. They get sent to the Bossier Parish Jail. So So you could have people from all over the state end up anywhere because wherever they have room, that's where they send the people.
Somewhat you have answered all my questions, and once again, I just thank you for coming out and spending the time to come out here, especially during your campaign. Takes as busy as you are.
I appreciate you inviting me because one thing is that the people need to know that they have a viable candidate in me, that I'm here for the people of Caddo Parish. Like I said, this has been almost a lifelong goal. People talk about a long campaign trail. I've been on this campaign trail for 30 years. I don't know if anybody else has ever been campaigning that long. I may have set a record. But it is time for a change, and I ask that everybody would vote for me and let me continue my service to our community as their next sheriff, and give me the opportunity to help improve things, and we can all have a better community in life.
Speaking of community, I like your vision that you have, especially with what you mentioned at, again, when I met you at the CC Antoine birthday celebration. When you mentioned that it's more than your regular job, your regular 8 to 5 job. You have responsibilities outside your job as well. Like you said, doing if people have anything dealing with the community or high school games, sheriff should be out there supporting the community.
Right, and that goes to the community-oriented policing, or what I refer to as what we're going to do is community outreach. That if you have a community liaison deputy, a community officer, their job is not 8 to 5. Their job is to be with the community. And if I'm the community liaison for a neighborhood, well, the people in the neighborhood during the school year, parents are going to be at work, kids are going to be at school. So if I'm at work in the neighborhood at 8 to 5, who am I talking with? Most of the people are at their jobs or at school. So if I'm going to be there 8 to 5, I should be at the schools. But the thing is, you should be at the high school football games, basketball games. You should be at any community, national night out, barbecues. You should be in the community when the community is there, because that's who you're there to represent and talk with and build relationships with as a community. So if you're working 8 to 5 and the people aren't there at 8 to 5, you're not building relationships with the community. You're just getting a paycheck for not much of anything.
Very good point. Very good point proven. Again, I just thank you for taking the time to come out on the show. Before we close, everyone know I always conclude scripture and prayer here on Tro. I do not lead the man upstairs out for anything. It is tradition that we close out in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for once again waking us up today. We thank you for keeping us from harm. We thank you for just blessing us every day, even when we don't deserve it. Yet, you care and give us the love that you want us to have. You can love us. For that, we thank you. For that, we thank you. Those who are listening and tuning in today, I ask you bless them and keep them safe. Help us to show compassion towards one another. I ask that those who are going out to vote today, get them there safely and back home safe. This I pray. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to once again thank Mr. Glenn Cornell for coming out on our next show. We will have another good special guest. Until next time, I'm Jeff Trotter, the executive producer of Tro. Truth, realness, and options. May everyone have a safe and blessed day.